Hello, this is Sage Man of TAPAS and Stuff Productions coming to you from a rainy day in Greenville, Wisconsin. As you can see, I've already regained a Wisconsin accent. I'm kidding, of course. As everyone knows, there is no Wisconsin accent. So I've got my own space in my aunt's basement. Bedroom, bathroom, living room, fridge, pizza oven. It's like my own little apartment. In lieu of paying rent, I provide labor at her immensely popular drive-in diner. I am incredibly fortunate. The only downside is that intense phobia of driving I somehow developed last year. God only knows where that came from. So that's going to cause a lot of people a lot of hassle unless I can get the hell over it. But it's not a huge deal. I've definitely got a very good set of life circumstances here, a job I love, winter's off. It's good to be back. I feel like recapping what I do on this podcast. I have 4 segments about creative pursuits that I'm pursuing. The first segment is devoted to Drizzt and the Companions of the Dance Hall, a musical parody of the Drizzt novels that I wrote and hope to produce someday. Today we're talking about Act 2, Scene 3. Lights up on Irenicus and a few other bad guys. Alton and Mazaj are trying to figure out why Gwenhwyvar won't answer Mazaj's call. Virna storms in and demands to speak to Irenicus. Irenicus refuses to give her any answers. He storms off and sings a little song called The Ballad of Jonny. I wrote a song by that title a very long time ago, a filk number about the plot of Baldur's Gate 2, and I decided to reuse the song's title for a new song for this musical. Yeah, this song has a tune, but I don't like the tune. Always intended when I found a composer to have them redo it, so we'll see what Brian thinks when he gets to this point. But I might as well give you the original melody, like for the historical record. Starts off a big cowboy-style verse performed by Irenicus himself. In the forests of afar, deep in Saldanesalar, I and Bodhi desired to be gads among the stars. We would scheme day and night for our dream, and I'd beam at the sight of my love, Elasim. And so the day came I tried to drain the energy of the Tree of Life. Elasim caught me in the act and seemed to think it was wrong or something. We were brought before the Seldarine for judgment, and without a care for our glorious reasons they exiled us, and to make sure we'd belong nowhere, they ripped out our souls like you'd pit an avocado, turning us into filthy humans and bidding us to turn tail and head for the hills. They thought that they had silenced me. They couldn't be more wrong. Exile's not a punishment. It's carte blanche to come back strong. And as I pondered my revenge, I considered all my elven friends, and none of them mattered to me. Side note, for the past 16 years, I've been quite certain that when Irenicus and Bodhi were robbed of their souls, they were also turned into humans, but suddenly, I don't remember why, sometime after I wrote the script, I began to wonder if that's even the case. Maybe they stayed elves. I don't know. Irenicus has a very muscular figure that you don't see a lot in elves, and he wears a skull cap that hides his ears, which he might do to hide the fact that they are either human ears or elf ears. So, I'm ultimately not sure. I'd have to play the game again. I don't have the time for that. It's a very long game, but I'm going to stick with my original assumption for the Companions of the Dance Hall continuity that Irenicus and Bodhi became human when they were banished. Anyway, yeah, the song starts out with a cowboy verse, and the bulk of it is more of a doo-wop number. Irenicus hallucinates an image of his old flame, Queen Elasim, backed up by 2 elf men, and she sings, Jonny, 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 I stripped of your spirit and left to die, never to enter Arvindor above. Can't you try for some remorse, my love? You've had your chance, you've had your fall, sent to hell by the child of Baal. Now you're back and trying again. Please come back to me, you'll never win. And there's a few more verses after that. In the end, Irenicus rages against his hallucinations and is finally interrupted by Bodhi, who wants dancing golems for her solo number. He's not sure he can do that, and he goes on preparing his evil plan. Team Salmon segment. Salmon! In this segment, I talk about assorted ideas I have for Team Salmon, the actual creative crew behind TAPAS and Stuff Productions, and the various projects we're pursuing, most of them animated. This week, Team Salmon has expanded by like 2 people, so there's 6 people in the team now. Casey is working on final designs for the cast of The Choices, while Christine has signed on to put some guitar chords and vocal melodies to the musical numbers. I hope to have a story reel for the Choices pilot episode by the end of the year. We'll work on that. Well, most of my team does college, and I do the best damn burgers in the state of Wisconsin. I have this notion right now that in October, when the restaurant closes, I'll travel to Quincy to collect voice talent for numerous projects, those being the irregular webcomic fan dub, first season of the Phoebe and Her Unicorn fan dub, the Choices story reel, and perhaps a performance of my friend Mason's play. He wanted me to be the lead. I feel bad about ducking out. I do hope to return and make up for that. Help put on that play, record it, put it here on the channel. As for Driss and the Companions of the Dance Hall, maybe next year? Good old 2020 is a good year for releasing big things, I would imagine. I'm not sure where I'm going to be next year. I definitely want to fill out the forms that would allow me to immigrate to Sweden. That's on my schedule for next week. Gotta fill those out. That form takes 10 to 15 months to process, and I can't enter Sweden during that time, so next year I may or may not stay here at my aunt's doing the restaurant again, or I may move to Sweden. That'd be a hell of a way to get some education and healthcare, being, anywhere that's not the United States. Regarding Keys and Kingdoms, The Choices, I originally wanted the voice cast to be the people who created the characters, but Meredith and Christine didn't think that was such a good idea, citing prior commitments, geography, not being voice actors. Fair enough. So I think I'll audition people in Quincy for roles. That'll be fun. I've never planned to audition people for a project before. All my other projects, I know exactly who I want in every role and intend to just call them. But yeah, holding auditions for The Choices, that'll be cool. That being said, I do hope to get my sisters involved, having Ermi and Zia play Eri and Zaya in The Choices, as well as Phoebe and Dakota in the Phoebe fan dub. So maybe they can visit me in Quincy? People go off to visit grandparents and aunts and uncles all the time. Why not a visit to one's beloved big brother? Either that, or I can head to Denver and record them separately from everyone else. Whatever. I've got 6.5 months to figure out where I'm going to be in October. I'll start really planning out the future in, let's say, July. So if my project of choice right now is The Choices, I suppose I'd better talk about its story if I'm going to get people invested. As Meredith suggested, I need a pitch, so let me ponder that a bit. I know the central premise of the Keys and Kingdoms universe as a whole is Dungeons & Dragons meets Disney. I intend to be somewhat open about that. The idea of The Choices is that it's a notion of how a Keys and Kingdoms campaign might go. So it's an adventure set in that universe with an all-female main cast, but I don't really want to call attention to that. I kind of want that as just speak for itself. I'm gonna have to work on that pitch. And, so I was thinking, I was gonna summarize the pilot episode like I've summarized many things before on this podcast, but you know what? It's a big project that I plan to unveil within the year. It wouldn't do at all to publicly reveal details about this particular story. Back to the Droon segment, in which I summarize a book from my favorite childhood book series, The Secrets of Droon, and plan out how I'd adapt the series to television. Today we're doing Book 17, The Knights of Silversnow, illustrated once again by Tim Jessel. Without further ado, let's dive in. Chapter 1, Turvy Topsy. Eric is feverishly debating whether or not he should use the Wand of Uruk to prevent Julie from moving away. Finally, he goes for it, and Mr. Rubin immediately gets a phone call telling him his old company wants him back in an even better position. But then, weird stuff starts happening. One petal falls from the Wand of Uruk's flowery head, Julie's cat barks, and a procession of hooded goblinoid figures start marching down the street. Yeah, this book's illustrations are kind of faded, too. Anyway, they run like hell to Droon, and end up straight in Kia's room, where they discover that Jaffa City is being overrun by marmots, tiny orange mammalian beasts on the hunt for cheese. Chapter 2, Pesty Pests. The kids join Zello, Relna, Max, and Nilag in fighting off the marmots, who are spilling out of a hole in the palace courtyard that was created by an earthquake early that morning. Relna sends the kids and Max to Farn Woods to consult Portentia about what the heck is going on. Eric tries to hand the Wand of Uruk off to Kia, but it keeps zooming back into his hand. The earthquakes continue as they head off for the woods. Chapter 3, Riddles in the Woods. As they enter the Farn Woods, Eric has a vision of the black staircase that was depicted on the murals in Ko's palace. They enter Portentia's grove, and the Oracle has become much better at composing rhyming prophecies since the last time we saw her. She reveals that the earthquakes are caused by Spar's ride through Gaul, and that to help Galen stop him, they need to go to the Ice Hills and awaken the Knights of Silversnow, a trio of ancient knights who are sleeping, waiting for the moment when Droon needs them most. Another earthquake hits, and from a resultant hole in the ground come a trio of Hagons, dragons with the heads of hags, who are headed for the Ice Hills themselves. Chapter 4, Scary Caravan. The heroes ride to the north. When they near the Ice Hills of Tarabat, they find an army of Nins walking along a dried riverbed, building a portable siege tower. Kia and Julie use the fog of invisibility, callback, to spy on the Nins, while the boys and Max proceed toward the Ice Hills. They find that a lumpy village is built on the riverbed, and that the Nins in their tower are en route to trample the whole place. Eric uses the Wand of Uruk to alter the path of the riverbed so the Nins will bypass the village. Eric is shocked at how powerful the wand is, as well as the fact that it's lost another petal. The girls return, having learned that the Nins are using the siege tower to ascend the icy cliffs of Tarabat, and are heading to Silversnow just like the Hagons. Chapter 5, Out of the Frosty Earth. The kids arrive at Tarabat and ascend to the highest peak, where the frozen castle of Silversnow is hidden. Eric has another vision, of Zara, Queen of Light, descending the black staircase, carrying the infant Spar. Zara's name turns out to be the magic word to reveal the castle, where they find the sleeping Knights of Silversnow. Chapter 6, The Sleepers Awake. They awaken the Knights, who turn out to be giants, and a very comical, light-hearted trio. They're led by Old Rolf, who fights with a massive shield, and the other two are named Lunk and Smee, and they fight with axes. They reminisce about when they found a young Galen frolicking in the snow and gave him directions to Ko's palace. They went to sleep when Gaul fell. They descend a tunnel called the Darky Darkness to find Galen and Gaul and help him. Chapter 7, Strange Discoveries. On the way to the Darky Darkness, they discover the mines of the Orkans, a race of people who Emperor Ko enslaved to mine the stone for his palace and the mysterious Black Stairs. The Orkans haven't been seen for centuries. They find the Darky Darkness and descend the tunnel by riding Old Rolf's shield like a sled. They ride straight into Gaul and immediately find Galen. Chapter 8, A Big, Big Secret. Galen explains that Spar has found Ko's magic sword, and that when Galen tried to take it from him, Khufu slimed him. And that's the state they found him in. Eric tries to give the Wand of Uruk to Galen, but as with Kia, the wand insists on staying with Eric. A band of Nins appear, hesitating when they realize the kids are carrying Orcan-made toys, and fleeing when Galen is freed from the slime. And here we learn that Silversnow was built to hide the Dark Stair, which Ko built as a bridge to the home of Zara, the upper world. Now that Spar has Ko's sword, he can ascend the Dark Stair and return to the upper world, his birthplace. The band returns to Silversnow, which is being attacked by the Hagons. Chapter 9, The Battle of Battles? Max and the Knights of Silversnow battle the Hagons, while the rest of the group goes to confront a group of 10 Nins, including the one who stole the Orcan toy. Eric uses magic to disguise himself as Spar to lead the Nins to the Orcan mine, where his suspicions are confirmed. After Ko's death, Spar transformed the Orcans into the Nins. With their memories of Orcan culture ignited, most of the Nins change back into Orcans. Not all of them, but enough that the Nins are heavily outnumbered for the battle to be over before it began. Then, Khufu and Spar turn up. Chapter 10, The Adventure of the Wand. Spar fights his way to the door that leads to the Dark Stair. Galen stops him by combining the strength of all the good guys, including the non-wizards among them, into a single blast of energy, which reduces the Dark Stair to rubble, and leaves Spar nowhere to be found. Galen transforms Khufu back into what he used to be, the river that flowed through Orcan lands. The Orcans, as it turns out, are legendary cheesemakers, so that solves the marmot problem. Eric touches the Wand of Uruk, and when he's touching it, he can see what no one else can. The rubble of the Dark Stair is just an illusion. The stair is still intact, and Spar is ascending it. Spar casts a spell that makes them all move very slowly, but thanks to the wand, Eric is unaffected. He chases Spar up the stair, at the top of which is a jeweled doorway leading to the upper world. And there, the book ends. What can I say about this book? It's just brilliant. Culture, history, comedy, emotion, high-stakes drama, so much going on. I don't know why I try to review each book. In this segment, I'm not a reviewer, but man, this book was good. Adaptation. A whopping 9 new guest characters debut in this book. The first being Julie's dad, Mr. Rubin. I will cast Matthew Lewis. Yeah, I think one of each of the trio's parents should be played by Harry Potter cast members. Thought it'd be funny. For the 3 Haggans, I'm thinking adaptational attractiveness. We put 3 actresses in dragon suits and wild and crazy wigs, but they have the faces of ordinary women. The 3 actresses I had in mind are Ming-Na Wen, Tress MacNeille, and Laurie Allen. For the Knights of Silversnow, first of all, let me just say, I hope I'm not the only guy who spent a childhood being disappointed when people referred to as giants turned out to be 7 feet tall. It's not a giant, that's a really big human. So, my fantasy would be to use forced perspective and green screens to make the Knights of Silversnow closer to 10 feet tall. For their actors, I wanted Ty Burrell as Old Rolf, Ahmed Best as Lunk, and Simon Helberg as Smee. I think they have the physicality and comedic chops to portray these characters quite well. The Nin leader who first recognizes the Orkin toys and is the first to change back into an Orkin, I think merits a guest star. He's identified as the Orkin Chief in prose, so that's what we'll call him, and I imagine him played by Gil Birmingham. Orkins resemble Nins, but with blue skin instead of red, and soft features instead of sharp. The 9th character is Zara, who I imagined being played by a very special guest star, Olivia Wilde. Zara doesn't have any lines in this book, so her animated counterpart wouldn't get an actress until later, but I am still at least partially musing about how it'd go as a live-action series, so Zara debuts here. Now, this is a good time to stop and reflect back on the segment, because the 17th book of The Secrets of Droon is not book number 17, it's special edition number 1. Of the 44 Droon books, 8 are special editions. Special editions have 12 chapters instead of 10. 2 of the special editions are told by first-person narrators, and in theory they represent the biggest and most world-shattering events in the Droon saga, so this being the last normally numbered book, it's a good time for reflection. As I said last week, I looked back on my previous Droon segments, thinking back on how I'd really go about adapting the series. Even though I'll continue talking about my original plans, I'm now thinking an animated web series in the style of Nomad of Nowhere, hopefully with enough airtime in the budget that each book can be expanded rather than trimmed down. I've divided the 44 books up into 6 seasons, so this could be a 6-season TV series with a total of 88 episodes, if we give every book 2 episodes, which we can easily do, because if it's a web series, there's no set length that each episode has to be. Maybe make it 90 episodes, because I think it makes sense if the final book got 4 whole episodes to shine. Season 1 in my plan covers books 1 through 8. As I've said previously, I kind of consider that the first story arc of the series. So 16 episodes. It's a bit of a tall order, but perhaps it could be done. Season 2 consists of books 9 through 16, as well as special edition number 1. So that's 18 episodes. So I'll talk a bit more about Season 2 next week, when I'll be finished with it. With my new fantasy being that the adaptation is a Rooster Teeth animated series, I've adjusted my casting ideas. For Eric and Neil, I still plan to audition whatever 11-ish-year-old boys are out there in the area, still hoping for a young Daniel Radcliffe type and a young Macaulay Culkin type who'll grow up over the course of the series' 6 years. Julie and Kia don't necessarily need to be voiced by 11-year-old girls, they can be played by teen girls or even older women. And who's a teen girl associated with Rooster Teeth? That'd be Millie Ramsey, so she can be Julie, and I mentioned considering my sister Zia for the role of Kia, that still holds true. For Lord Spar, still me. Max and Galen in my original fantasy would have been played by Vern Troyer and Mark Hamill. For the new Max, I dream of Jeremy Dooley, my favorite achievement hunter. For Galen, I'm taking Tony Abbott's statement that he'd want to play Galen at face value. If it turns out he was joking and he doesn't want to do it, we'll go back to trying to nab Mark Hamill, why not? But, I hope Tony at least considers auditioning. And from here, I'd like to just recap my Dreamcast for all the major guest stars debuting in Season 1. For those of you watching the visual aids, if their name is in brackets, that means I'm now thinking they're too big to be a guest star on a Rooster Teeth show. And that for the role, perhaps we'll audition someone within Rooster Teeth or local voice talent. I'm such a dweeb, my fantasies are way too elaborate, but if any of these fantasies come true, I'm going to be seen as a freaking genius who really thinks ahead. So that Dreamcast for Season 1 consisted of Judy Greer as Mrs. Hinkle, Jim Cummings as Khan, Tara Strong as Demeter, Brad Garrett as King Zello, Nice Peter as Bodo, Epic Lloyd as Vaza, Daniel Radcliffe as Mr. Hinkle, Grey Delisle Griffin as Queen Relna, Billy West as Batamogi, T.C. Carson as Zor, Maurice LaMarche as Shago, Russi Taylor as Queen Hazad, Jan Rabson as the Moonfox, Ellen DeGeneres as Portentia, Jesse McCartney as Prince Zorvendorf, and Cree Summer as Queen Ortha. And the final segment of the podcast is the Keys and Kingdoms segment, in which, in order to provide inspiration for the aforementioned role-playing game that's essentially Dungeons & Dragons meets Disney, I'm watching a boatload of Disney's films. This week in Keys and Kingdoms, I'm afraid I'm going to have to skip the usual nature of the segment, because the next film on my list is Sleeping Beauty, and that seems to be in the Disney vault, as are 101 Dalmatians and The Jungle Book. So I couldn't download those films. I had to order used DVDs, so we have to wait for them to arrive in the mail. As I said before, who fucking ray for artificial scarcity? You gotta become the most powerful company in the world somehow. I love Disney's creative output, I truly do, and I love what they've done with a lot of the companies they've absorbed, but I'll admit that when I found out about the Fox merger, I was fucking terrified. I gotta draw the line there, that's just too much. So here's what we're doing in the Keys and Kingdoms segment this week. I'm going to tell you what awaits you in the next couple of weeks after my DVDs arrive, because I've purchased the next 7 films in my collection. After Sleeping Beauty, we'll be watching Darby O'Gill and the Little People, a live-action film about leprechauns and other Irish folklore, which I would not have heard of nor considered a candidate for my list if it weren't for the special place it holds in the heart of Doug Walker, so perhaps he's good for something after all, assuming the film is any good. Here's a good moment for a tangent I've been wanting to do since starting this podcast. There are 2 schools of thought regarding when the Disney animated canon's Silver Age ends and its Bronze Age, also called its Dark Age, begins. Some say that the last film of the Silver Age is Sleeping Beauty, and that the first film of the Bronze Age is 101 Dalmatians, because Dalmatians was the first animated feature to employ xerography, an animation technique which, I assume by the name, employs copy machines in some manner that makes animation cheaper and easier, giving Disney's animated films the pencil-sketchy look they had throughout the 60s, 70s, and 80s. Some say, therefore, that that is the Bronze Age. I personally favor the other school of thought, that the final film of the Silver Age is in fact The Jungle Book, marking the first film of the Bronze Age, The Aristocats. My reasoning is that The Jungle Book was the last film that Walt Disney worked on before his death in 1966. Jungle Book came out the following year, and Aristocats didn't come out until 3 years after that. I consider the death of the producer that made the prior 30 years of Disney magic possible to represent a far greater change in the company than the introduction of some new money-saving technique, and in my opinion, starting the Bronze Age there represents a much more noticeable shift in the overall quality of the movies. After 101 Dalmatians, we'll be seeing Babes in Toyland, which I don't really know anything about, so that'll be something quite new. Then we'll see The Sword and the Stone, followed by Mary Poppins, and we'll be finishing off the Silver Age with The Jungle Book. I'm gonna head to Facebook, look for guest stars to watch and discuss the films with me. So now, as with the Droon segment, I'm gonna go over what I know for sure about the Keys and Kingdoms universe thus far. 10 core races, as illustrated by this here picture that I've used before. 12 classes, as illustrated by this helpful graphic. May or may not just use 5th edition D&D rules and all their subclasses, as seen here. Whether that ends up being the final way the game works out or not, it's how I'm approaching stories such as The Choices, Giving each character a 5th edition character sheet and using that as a guideline for what they're capable of, rather than hard and fast rules for how the story works, The gods of Keys and Kingdoms, the Greek, Egyptian, and Norse pantheons. As with the classes, my initially planned setup fits perfectly with an established set of D&D stuff, in this case the 3rd edition supplement, deities and demigods. So I'll just use these gods right here. I just changed the spelling of a few names as I saw fit. This image could probably use some zooming in on, so here, get that pause button ready. The Olympian pantheon, the Pharaonic pantheon, the Asgardian pantheon, And I'll give each god my own little twists, mix together what D&D says about them with what's written in actual mythologies, kind of redesign them a little bit. I've also drawn a loose draft of what the Keys and Kingdoms core setting might look like. So here's that. The planet is known as Cosmos. The world is divided into 3 regions, each corresponding to one of the pantheons. Dizvik for the Asgardian pantheon, Samia for the Olympian pantheon, and Syr for the Pharaonic pantheon. Each region has 6 countries in it that correspond to a portion of the real world. This map is just my initial doodle of the place. There are definitely going to be more islands and rivers and interesting geographical features. This is just a jumping off point for all that. The central seat of Dizvik is the country of Athendoft, which is based on an amalgamation of all these Scandinavian countries, and is where you go when you want to get to Asgard. Shefell is a nation consisting of 3 large islands, and they represent the British Isles. The continent consists of the tiny country of Underheim, based on Germany, and the larger countries of Strumvik, representing Russia, Gyanshi, representing China, and Nixie, representing pre-colonial North America. Samia, centered on the small equatorial island nation of Magne, is based on Greece, and is where one finds Mount Olympus. North of that is the massive continental nation of Nastine, based on the United States. This sort of swinging pendulum axe-shaped landmass consists of Oneco, based on both Rome and modern-day Italy, Pontou, representing France, and Kufira, representing the Middle East. And then far to the east is the island nation of Mabayashi, corresponding to Japan. Finally, there's Syr, centered upon the massive empire of Akmis, which represents the continent of Africa, molding together all the disparate cultures therein, kind of like in Black Panther. Yeah. The Egyptian gods, I forget what sort of cosmology deities and demigods gave to the pharaonic pantheon, but whatever it is, they're based in the northern area of the continent, with rivers and deltas and stuff, you know, the Egypty part of Akmis. While Akmis is the largest country on Cosmos, they haven't quite conquered the whole continent, as they share it with Mahanja, corresponding to India, and Tehuaco, a tiny country corresponding to Spain and Portugal. To the west is Itaxan, representing the cultures of both pre-colonial Mesoamerica and post-colonial Latin America. And to the east there's Wogo, a collection of many islands representing Polynesia. I gotta work on those tiny coastlines, the country just looks like a pile of beans. And the distant island nation of Kefell, representing Australia. And now comes the part where I listen to all previous Keys and Kingdoms segments and make a list of all the things I've determined about the universe thus far. Note to self, don't delete this while reading it like you do to everything else in the podcast scripts. Make a copy of it, put it somewhere for future reference. Alright, done that. Okay. So here's what I know so far. In the first episode of the podcast, prior to embarking on my quest to watch all the Disney films, I went over the basics of the 10 core races, as well as the Nemo, and I still can't figure out whether they're called heart constructs or soul constructs. I've been using both interchangeably because I can't remember which one I settled on. I briefly pondered a rule that I've come back to on multiple occasions, that being that there really ought to be special rules for dealing with enemies of different sizes, whether you're the Colossus Climber or the Colossus. I brought up that there ought to be goblins, orcs, ogres, and other basic RPG opponents in the game. And I first mentioned the 8 themes. Fairy tales, mythic, sort of an epic myth theme, pirates, cowboys, the western theme, tribes, the barbarian fantasy theme, aliens, the sci-fi theme, urban, and wildlife. I'm thinking now that the 8 themes shouldn't be kept quite so disparate, rather that every campaign setting, whatever it may be, has major elements of all of them. As far as campaign settings, I'm going to focus on Cosmos for now, but we'll see what else arises as Keys and Kingdoms ages and goes through its life cycle. When watching Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, I pondered the dimension of wind and darkness where the spirit of the magic mirror comes from, monsters based on Snow White's hallucinations, musical numbers. I'm employing them in stories set in cosmos, if nothing else. They'll definitely be a big part of the choices. I thought of deer as riding mounts for smaller characters, and made the decision that dwarves definitely are small characters. I want to put a lot of emphasis on the verbal, somatic, and material components of spellcasting. That's going to be a big theme in the choices as well. Not a plot or story theme, just a visual theme. And then there's true love as a counter curse. That'd be kind of cheap in an RPG. We'll see. We'll see if that can work, but it'd work in stories. From Pinocchio, I figured I ought to go into the nature of stars. I thought about the fact that any animal can be trained or can be loyal. I thought about the external conscience for heart constructs and the biology of living constructs. The coachman as a template for some kind of archdevil. Pleasure Island as an adventure setting, and the coachman's henchman is something. Character in the Keys and Kingdoms mythology will be Maldiabos, the demon whale, inspired by Monstro. Possibly a spell that allows you to walk underwater almost as if it was air, and it being a common goal for a lot of folks to become human. From Fantasia, I figured I'd include a long list of musical instruments for bards, that there should be nymphs, who are pixie-like creatures who actually guide nature and the seasons. I went with calling them nymphs instead of using the already existing pixies, because, pixies are playable. I don't think they should be quite that influential. Mushroom creatures, a hat of sorcery or some such, a book of flying, astral projection, weather control, wooden constructs with insane regenerative capabilities. Thoughts about the birth of the K&K universe, including volcanic hellscapes and extinction events. Motherfucking dinosaurs and other extinct beasts. Unicorns, satyrs, pegasi, centaurs, possibly nightmares. Centaurs having a really racist, almost caste system. Supernatural donkeys. Ostriches, hippos, elephants, crocodiles. Cultures that dress like the figures in Dance of the Hours. An archdevil inspired by Chernobog, having some connection to the gargoyle race. Demons and devils, fiery ladies, harpies, ghosts, skeletons. All I got from the Reluctant Dragon was that K&K should obviously have dragons, and I'm just going to go ahead and make them like D&D dragons. From Dumbo, I got to thinking about two races I want to include in the setting, Elephantors and Carforged. I thought about maybe air and water being damage types, or at least having more presence in magic, the four elements having more presence in magic. Circus tropes, the utilities of a world where, as mentioned before, any animal can be tamed. Mishkas, possibly having an affinity for elephants. Magical drugs that make you trip. Pink elephants, I think something inspired by them ought to be residents of the realm of dreams I mentioned when I did Alice in Wonderland. And either an avian equivalent of Mishkas, or at least just talking crows. And from Bambi, I got to thinking about animal culture and the wildlife theme, how to reconcile that theme with a normal setting with normal animals, and rain and weather, and that'll be all for now. That's a list of everything I learned about Keys and Kingdoms from watching the 6 Golden Age films. I'll do the package era next week, because listening to past episodes of my podcast and taking notes on them is actually kind of time-consuming. So thanks for listening. Next week, it's more of the same, except I'll have a work schedule to work around. I work every day for the next 2 weeks. Yay!